a lot of negative coaching behaviors, okay? And it's important that we talk about it because it is going to affect your journey as an ex-athlete, your life as an ex-athlete, and your capability to heal and what you choose to do in the future as an ex-athlete. So it's a topic that's so important and that honestly isn't talked about. So that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to talk about the things that aren't talked about. Have you ever had a coach that pushed you so hard you felt like you were breaking? Or a coach who simply ignored all of your emotional needs and treated you just like another player on the roster? For many athletes and ex-athletes, our coaches aren't just our teachers. They are actually figures of authority that shape our careers, that shape our identity, and unfortunately, sometimes our trauma as well. This can really swing two ways, and we will get right into it, but a bit of a backstory and a bit of an example here is, like, for one example, I had a coach in Germany who would tell us every single day that you are a piece of okay, along with a lot of other harsh things. That's me putting it lightly, all right? But on the flip side, you know, I've had other coaches who raised my level of confidence and really emotionally cared for me and were a great coach and didn't have that harsh, toxic side to them. So I understand it can really go both ways. It can swing both ways. Let's get right into it though. The role of coaches in self-development. And if you are an ex-athlete, this is something that is so important to acknowledge and take the time to actually self-educate yourself about. You see, coaches are not just responsible for your physical development or how you perform as an athlete, especially when you were put into the athletic world at a young age. Nonetheless though, regardless of that, coaches are also looked up to in terms of parent-like, guardian-like figures. And so they affect our emotional development and our mental development as well. And if you were a child athlete, just understand that you are like a sponge and you absorb everything even more. So, you know, I left home when I was 13. I wasn't a 9-year-old, I was a 13-year-old, but I wasn't a full grown adult, okay? So the coaches I had during that time affected me even more, whether that was in a positive or negative manner. So the relationship that you have with a coach or coaches over your lifetime of being an athlete, they affect you long term, okay? In good ways and in bad ways, dependent on the coach. So the influence of coaching styles. Firstly, we have like the positive, influential kind of coach, and I've had that kind of coach too. These kinds of coaches firstly build significant trust and they help you thrive not only physically, but mentally. And when you are thriving mentally, usually you thrive physically more, as in you perform better. I remember I had this one specific coach for 1 year. I was 17 years old and she was the first coach that I had ever had that like really nurtured me mentally, and my confidence was all of a sudden on this complete different level. And it wasn't a egotistical sense of confidence. It was a confidence in how I performed. You know, there was trust there and there was emotional support as well. Not as in she was my therapist or anything, but there was emotional support in the way that she coached me, through her body language, through her tonality. And I can say the same for other athletes who are coached by her as well. On the flip side though, you have the toxic or harsh coaching. And you know, this isn't only my experience. Most likely you too. I know so many athletes that also had very toxic, harsh coaches. These kinds of coaches will use fear, they will use intimidation, or potentially even emotional manipulation. And these kind of characteristics, of course, cause long-term damage to even ex-athletes, okay? I remember when I was little, before I even left home and to go to the Australian Ballet School, before any of that, I remember I was in this like, you had to get in, basically it's like this, I don't want to use words, but, or pin anyone out because I don't want any drama, but basically there was this like company that you could perform in, you had to audition for, you had to get in, but it was also attached to this special coaching school, okay? So it was marketed in a way though that it was a good experience and that you get known and stuff like that, but in all honesty, it was just to show her special coaching students. And if you weren't one of her coaching students, then you wouldn't be a soloist and you wouldn't be pushed towards the front and everything like that. Anyway, I wasn't one of her coaching students, but I was part of this performance youth thing. And long story short, you know, she did treat me a little bit differently. Obviously, she was interested in me. I could tell that she was. And she invited me, you know, into her special coaching facility. And I think I remember the way she would treat me, and there was a little bit of toxicity there and stuff. And you know what? The funny thing is, the day that she found out that I was going to go to the Australian Ballet School was the day that she moved me from the front to the back. You know, so that, you know, I don't think it caused long-term damage to me, but if anything, I just laughed about it. But for someone else, it could have caused long-term damage. I didn't emotionally feel hurt by any of that, but, you know, it could have affected someone else. So some common negative coaching behaviors. One is abuse, and by which I mean verbal abuse. These kinds of coaches will belittle you, they will humiliate you, or use really, really harsh language or tonality. And basically, it is their way of criticizing you to push you beyond your limits. So they think the verbal abuse is what is going to push you beyond your limits. Unfortunately, though, of course, this leaves scars on you, not only during your athletic journey, but also as an ex-athlete. And I do believe that these scars kind of show up more when you are an ex-athlete, just because you have all this time to reflect and think, and you're not distracted, and you usually feel really lost and confused, and so it all kind of hits you, and all these suppression of emotions or situations and scenarios and PTSD that can occur whilst you are an athlete kind of comes to surface, you know. The next one is emotional neglect. This is where coaches will simply ignore your emotional needs, or they might invalidate your feelings. So in an environment like this, you will feel isolated and you will not feel supported. I've felt like that before. The third one is they will just set really unrealistic expectations on you. So the coaches who push you beyond your limits in a, for example, verbal, abusive, criticizing way, and really not considering the mental health aspect, or maybe the physical aspect as well of physical health and recovering, and, you know, forcing you to push through an injury or something like that. This can cause long-term stress and anxiety in the athlete, but also as an ex-athlete. And the last one is toxic competition. I'm sure we've all been exposed to this one, let alone majority of the ones I've already talked about. This is for the coaches who essentially foster a hyper-competitive environment, meaning that, like, you have to win at all costs. Like, not winning, that is not an option. Not only does this create an environment of extreme pressure, but additionally, it creates an environment where you learn and you absorb, and you truly do believe that you're not worthy and that you are of no value unless you win. And that's a simple example of where this belief can kind of come from. You will notice that I'm like laughing throughout this, and it's just, the reason I laugh is because, you know, I am grateful that I kind of had this aspect. I remember when I went to the Australian Ballet School, when I was literally on the plane flight there to start, when I was 13, I told myself that I'm never going to take anything personally, because I knew what the environments were like. I had already been exposed to certain environments before I even went to the Australian Ballet School, where I learned if you take it personally, it's going to affect you, and you may not actually end up continuing being an athlete simply due to the mental, you know, aspects of it. And I understand completely, a lot of sports are extremely toxic for athletes' mental well-being. For me, it wasn't common that you run across a coach who supports you and is a good influence on you. Thankfully, that did happen to me. It did. But it's not common at all. And again, majority of my coaches throughout my entire athletic journey were toxic and harsh. And I will say that, like, I never took anything personally, anything of what any of the coaches said, ever since I decided to think in that way, which I think protected myself in a lot of ways. Nonetheless, though, there were still environments and situations and scenarios where I deep down took it personally, and the don't take it personally was actually just like this cover up and basically this way to really suppress emotions super well. So some of the scenarios in PTSD I didn't realize I actually had, or beliefs I had that I didn't realize I had, they all came to surface as an ex-athlete. So even with me and having the strong mentality of, oh, don't take it personally, it still did affect me, right? Now I've overcome that and I've healed from all of that, but I understand this topic in great lengths. All right, so let's talk about building PTSD from coaching and that aspect of the trauma there. Number one is obviously a loss of worth. You know, there's a reason athletes grow up to believe that they're only worthy if they perform well, they're only worthy if they succeed in some way, shape, and form. And if they don't win or they don't succeed, then they're not worthy and then they're not of value. And so when they lose their career, they often feel extremely worthless, which simply isn't true. However, one coach saying even just one thing that depicted and broke down and manipulated your idea of self-worth can then cause you to carry that through you into years and decades of your life as an athlete and as an ex-athlete. The second one is imposter syndrome. So if you were ever an athlete who was coached by a coach who made you never feel like you were enough, made you never feel like you were truly deserving and that you were just never good enough. Even the fact, like, some coaches will make you feel like you're not good enough despite your achievements. Like, there's a legitimate measurable thing where it's like, I achieved X, Y, Z. Even despite that, you're not good enough. So this can affect athletes in their life after sports simply because even with success or certain achievements, they still feel like they're not good enough. So they won't even recognize their own success or their own achievements because they don't see their own success or their own achievements as success or achievements. They can't see it in that manner. It's like they're blinded. The third one is hypervigilance or anxiety. So if you were ever coached by fear and the aspect of fear, and when you got coached, you felt really fearful and you always felt like you were on guard, right? And you were anxious about what other coaches thought of you or judges thought of you or the environment thought of you as a whole, this can create severe hypervigilance and anxiety in athletes, but of course, ex-athletes as well. A lot of these things, I wasn't even really aware that I was an anxious athlete until I was an ex-athlete and I reflected. I was like, oh my goodness, I was anxious, I just suppressed it, you know? And the last one, unfortunately, is, and that needs to be talked about, is PTSD symptoms as a retired athlete. All of the trauma from negative coaching, it manifests, okay? This can lead to nightmares, flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, or just this overwhelming sense of failure. I remember for me, I felt like 24/7 every day for years after being an athlete, I felt like a failure. I felt worthless. I felt invaluable. And I didn't truly understand where it came from. And then I reflected on, what were you exposed to as an athlete? Oh, hang on a second. That's harsh. That's toxic. That's manipulative. And it took me to reflect on, oh, hang on, that's not right. Just because it happened a lot, it doesn't make it right, doesn't make it normal. And that's how I understood, oh, this is where all of these beliefs are coming from. And the fact that you feel like a failure, even though you are succeeding and you are achieving in certain areas. I still didn't see it as a success or an achievement. I was very anxious, etc. I had flashbacks, I had nightmares. So what's important to talk about here is the long-term effect all of this has on mental health. What you went through during your athletic career that was traumatic, that was toxic, that was harsh, that was neglectful, that was manipulative, etc. This all affects your mental health as an ex-athlete. Because the trauma doesn't disappear when the sport ends. If anything, not only does the trauma stay with you, but the trauma often comes to surface because all of a sudden you don't have a reason to suppress the emotions, because a lot of the suppression of emotions was simply a tactic to keep being an athlete, to get to another level, etc. So you don't have that aspect of being an athlete. You don't have the identity of an athlete for a reason to suppress the emotions. And secondly, a lot of mental health just declines in ex-athletes when they lose their career for many reasons, which I've made many videos about. This not only affects your self-image, it affects your personal relationships and how you go about day-to-day life. Again, you can walk away from the sport, but the emotional scars and wounds, they stay with you. And those emotional scars and the emotional wounds, they will stay with you until one, you are aware of them. Remember how I said I wasn't even aware of all of these things. Like I didn't even reflect on them until I began my healing journey and I reflected. So until you acknowledge them, and then secondly, until you intuitively decide to heal. Otherwise, you will continue to carry these scars and wounds for decades of your life that will continue to affect your life in many ways, shapes, or forms, which is why not only am I quite passionate about this, but it's also why the only way I've been able to heal and the only way I've been able to create videos and help others with their mental health as an ex-athlete and their purpose, etc. as an ex-athlete, the only reason I'm able to do that is because I became aware, I acknowledged, and I decided to heal. Healing is a decision. And whilst these emotional scars and wounds, they may not be your fault, okay? None of it was my fault. To be honest, I never chose who my coaches were, right? I'm sure the story is the same for you. You don't choose who your coaches are, just like you don't choose who your parents are, right? Nonetheless, it is your responsibility to heal and acknowledge these scars and wounds. Otherwise, they will continue to affect you in the rest of your life, and you are deserving of creating the most meaningful, purposeful, joyful life after sport. And there is a life for you after sport that you are worthy of living. But it's up to you in order to create the best life possible for yourself after sport, or continue to live in the scars and wounds of being an ex-athlete. I want to talk about quickly the power of positive coaching, because I know a lot of ex-athletes are actually now coaches, which is great. A few things that I want to quickly mention is empathy in terms of how you coach. So simply acknowledging your athlete's mental state and providing empathy towards whatever they're feeling is incredibly important. If I felt heard and I felt like I was acknowledged, I would have actually not suppressed my emotions. And therefore, I would have created more confidence in my performance, and I wouldn't have felt like I was walking on eggshells throughout majority of my career. A second one, as a coach who is now coaching younger athletes, and you as a coach are an ex-athlete, my goodness, is to build trust. Make your students feel like they can trust you. Make your students feel like they can open up to you. Make your students feel like they are trusted and supported, not only by you, but also by the space they are in. So if you have other coaches working for you, it's important that you have a conversation to those other coaches as well, because just because one coach makes the clients or the students feel safe and supported, it doesn't mean that the other coaches do. This means providing constructive feedback in a non-harshful, non-toxic, non-manipulative way. There is a way to criticize someone in a positive, influential way, providing emotional support, and always helping your clients or students feel valued beyond their sport. Just because you were coached a certain way, and if you were coached in a toxic, manipulative, harsh way, and you were a great athlete, it doesn't mean that that's how you should coach the next generation. The third one is to mention the aspect of mentorship, okay? So you are a mentor to these clients or students. You're not just a coach. They look up to you. They are inspired by you. But therefore, they can get hurt by you, and they can feel neglected by you and ashamed by you, depending on how you choose to coach. So choose to be a mentor. Help athletes navigate the emotional side of their careers and help them grow as people, not just as athletes. Here is what athletes need from coaches. Open communication. Communicating in an open manner. Athletes need to feel listened to, they need to feel heard by their own coaches, otherwise they won't open up and they won't fully communicate with you. They need to feel heard and understood. The second one is they need to feel like you acknowledge mental health. You need to validate their mental health, because their mental health is just as important as their physical health. Many athletes retire and choose to quit even though they would have been the best athlete at what they were doing because of the mental aspect. And here's a reminder that it takes courage for athletes to emotionally acknowledge what they're feeling, let alone tell a coach about it. And as a coach, you are the one person who truly, deeply understands their sport. And the third one is balance. As a coach, you've got to balance being like a coach and also being a mentor. There's a balance between pushing an athlete to be the best athlete they can and also recognizing when the athlete is struggling. For example, mental and emotional breaks when they're feeling burnt out can help them long term keep being an athlete. Some athletes are like just choose to stop because they are just so burnt out and they were never given the opportunity to rest. And the third one, of course, is creating safe spaces. And this is all up to you. You know what would have made you feel safe as an athlete. You know what would have made you feel like you could open up to your coach about certain things. And if you didn't have that, well, then do the opposite. An athlete needs to feel like they can open up to you without the fear of judgment, because you judge them all the time in the way they perform. And also provide a transparency of healing. Coaches who admit their wrongdoing in the way that they've coached previously, or just one simple thing that they didn't handle the way they wish they could have handled it, helps your clients or students trust you more. Through apologies, accountability, and the commitment to change, athletes can learn to trust you. And remember, they already trust you to a certain degree because you are obviously a good coach in the aspect of performance, okay? They are choosing to continue to be coached by you for a reason. So there is an element of trust there always. You do need to nourish, though, the trust for mental and emotional support and for them to be open with their communication to you, which means you need to be open to them by acknowledging mistakes that you've made in the past. Now, some psychological advice for ex-athletes who are suffering with PTSD from different forms of coaching. It's really important to understand that the trauma you feel, it didn't come from you. It came from a coach or coaches. And more than anything else, it was often a result of the environment you're in. Healing can take time, but with that being said, it doesn't have to take as much time as you think it needs to take if you seek support and you get the professional help. Because there is a way to reframe those experiences and see them in a way that your unwounded self would have seen them. The third one is to develop a strong sense of self-compassion. Self-compassion is like self-love in a way, and treating yourself with respect. You don't have to prove your worth through perfection. Your value is not based on your performance. That's just a story, belief, narrative that you've accumulated and accepted at some point in time. The fourth one is to create healthy boundaries. It's really important to acknowledge that you cannot control what others did or said to you in the past, but you can control how you allow it to affect you moving forwards, okay? As you'll be able to see, a lot of the pain or negative experiences, PTSD, etc., that I experienced as an athlete, I've reframed it in such a tremendous way that now I use it to help others. And the fifth one is mindfulness and self-reflection. As I said, a lot of the PTSD that I experienced from coaching, I wasn't even aware existed. So I encourage you to regularly reflect on your journey and really practice a strong sense of compassion for the adversity and the negative experiences that you did face. So no matter how hard your journey has been, I want you to understand that the way your journey was and the experiences that you had can actually be seen in a positive light. Yeah, healing takes time, but it also doesn't need to take decades of your life or years and years and years if you get help as soon as you can. Because the other thing is, the longer you push off getting help, the more that these psychological things that you've been through, they actually manifest into psychological symptoms. Like there's a chance that I wouldn't have suffered with PTSD as an ex-athlete if I got the help initially. So to end it off here, your story matters. What you've been through is important, but also your story that you're creating now and your next chapter and your mental health now matters more than ever. That's it for today. Drop a like if this resonated with you. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, then definitely do so. Also, there are 5 new open one-to-one coaching slots available. These go out pretty fast because they are one-to-one. So if you would like to be coached by me or mentored by me, or you're simply interested, there is an application process you do need to go through. So you can click on the link and fill out the coaching application below, but it's also linked in my channel notes as well. And I will get back to you if you seem like a good fit, and then you and myself can make a decision moving forwards as to whether it is the right fit and the right time and space for you to begin your healing journey. But again, these slots go out very quickly because there's only 5, and the one-to-one coaching does take up a lot of my time and energy. So it's very, very rare that I open up one-to-one slots. They only become available when the previous people have actually finished up. So there is a very limited intake here, but that's it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.